There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't come from breaking rules, but from the slow realization that the rules you've lived by were designed to make you smaller than you are. Sophia had spent her entire life following orders, being the perfect soldier, the perfect agent, the woman who never questioned authority because questioning felt like weakness. But standing outside the iron gates of a villa in the Italian countryside, clutching a file that said she knew everything about the man inside, she was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous mission isn't taking down a criminal. It's discovering that everything you believed about right and wrong, about duty and desire, about who you're supposed to be versus who you actually are, might have been a lie from the beginning. If this story speaks to something deep inside you, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if this resonates with you, consider becoming a member for early access to our stories. Your support means everything. The file in Sophia's hands was thick, worn from being read too many times. Subject: Dante Caruso. Age: 34. Head of the Caruso family, one of the most powerful organized crime syndicates in Europe. Suspected involvement in everything from money laundering to arms dealing, but never convicted, never even charged. The man was a ghost who operated in plain sight, untouchable, protected by walls of lawyers and loyal soldiers, and a code of silence that the FBI had been trying to crack for 7 years. And Sofia Martinez, at 29, was the agent they'd chosen to finally bring him down. Not because she was the most experienced, though her record was flawless. Not because she was the toughest, though she'd proven herself in the field more times than most men twice her age. But because she had something the others didn't. She could become whoever she needed to be. She could slip into roles like changing clothes, could make people believe she was exactly what they wanted to see. It was a gift, her superiors said, the perfect weapon for undercover work. Sophia had never told them it wasn't a gift. It was survival. She'd learned young that being yourself was dangerous, that having opinions, showing emotion, taking up space, all of it made you a target. So she'd learned to disappear, to become whatever kept her safe, whatever got her ahead, whatever made the people in power happy. By the time she joined the FBI, the mask had become so familiar, she couldn't remember what her real face looked like anymore. The Bureau loved her for it. They could send her anywhere, make her anyone. The devoted wife who'd infiltrate a trafficking ring, the ambitious assistant who'd get close to a corrupt politician, the broken woman who'd gain the trust of a predator. She played them all perfectly because she'd been playing roles her entire life. But this assignment was different. This time, she wasn't playing a broken woman or an ambitious climber. She was playing herself, or a version close enough to make her uncomfortable. Art consultant, recently relocated from New York, with impeccable credentials and enough knowledge about Renaissance paintings to get invited into the circles where men like Dante Caruso moved. The plan was simple. Get close to him. Gain his trust. Find evidence that would finally put him away. The execution, they'd warned her, would be anything but. Because Dante Caruso wasn't just another target. Every agent who'd gotten close to him came back, changed, unsettled, talking about him in ways that made their handlers nervous. He's not what we expected, they'd say. He's dangerous in ways the file doesn't cover. Some refused to continue the investigation. Others became too sympathetic, compromised, had to be pulled out. One agent, a decorated veteran with 15 years of experience, had to be forced into early retirement after spending 3 months in Caruso's orbit. When pressed about what happened, all he'd say was, "You can't understand until you meet him. He makes you question everything." Sophia had read those reports with professional skepticism. She'd been trained to resist manipulation, to see through charm, to remember that criminals were criminals, no matter how compelling their stories. She wouldn't be swayed by a handsome face or smooth words. She'd do her job, get the evidence, and move on to the next assignment. That's what she told herself. That's what she believed, right up until the moment the villa gates opened and she drove through. The property was more beautiful than the surveillance photos suggested. Ancient stone walls covered in climbing roses, gardens that managed to be wild and perfectly maintained at the same time, fountains that sang with running water, and at the center of it all, a Renaissance villa that looked like it had been standing there for 500 years, which, according to her research, it had. The Caruso family had owned this land since the 1500s, back when they were nobles instead of criminals, when their power came from titles instead of fear. Sophia parked her rental car in the circular drive and took a moment to center herself, running through her cover story one more time, making sure every detail was locked in place. She was here for the art collection. Dante Caruso had acquired a painting at auction, a small work attributed to a student of Caravaggio, and he wanted an expert opinion on its authenticity and value. Her credentials were impeccable. Her references, carefully constructed by the Bureau, had checked out. She had no reason to be nervous, except her hands were shaking slightly as she gathered her leather portfolio and stepped out of the car. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman stood there, older, maybe 60, with severe features softened by kind eyes. "You must be Miss Martinez," she said in accented English. "Please come in. Il Capo is expecting you." Sophia followed her through a foyer that took her breath away despite herself. Marble floors, soaring ceilings with original frescoes, artwork that belonged in museums. Every step echoed, and Sophia found herself walking quietly, instinctively, as if she were in a cathedral. The woman led her through corridors lined with family portraits, faces that shared the same sharp features across centuries, all of them looking down with expressions that seemed to judge whether she was worthy of being here. They stopped at a set of double doors. The woman knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. "Miss Martinez," she announced, then stepped aside to let Sophia enter. The room was a library, floor-to-ceiling books, in what looked like a dozen languages. Leather furniture arranged around a fireplace large enough to stand in. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, creating geometric patterns on an antique desk where papers were spread with careful organization. And behind the desk, rising to his feet with fluid grace, was Dante Caruso. Sophia had studied his photographs, watched surveillance footage, memorized every detail of his face, but none of it prepared her for the reality of his presence. He was tall, easily 6'3", with the kind of build that suggested strength kept under strict control. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes so dark they seemed black until the light hit them and revealed depths of brown. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with elegant tattoos, Italian script and symbols that looked more like art than intimidation. There was something about him that the photos hadn't captured. A stillness, a sense of complete self-possession, the feeling that he knew exactly who he was and made no apologies for it. When he looked at Sophia, really looked at her, she felt like he was seeing past every carefully constructed layer straight through to something she'd forgotten existed. "Miss Martinez," he said, and his voice was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Deep, controlled, with an accent that made even English sound like music. "Welcome. Thank you for coming on such short notice." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Sophia sat, placing her portfolio on her lap, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. This was just another assignment. He was just another target. But when Dante settled back into his chair and gave her his full attention, Sophia had the uncomfortable feeling that she wasn't the one doing the hunting. She was being studied, assessed, seen in ways that made her want to check if her cover was showing cracks. "Shall we begin?" Dante asked, and something in his slight smile suggested he knew exactly what effect he was having on her. Sophia opened her portfolio with hands that were steadier than they should be, and said, "Yes, let's begin," not knowing that she was agreeing to far more than just examining a painting. The painting hung on the library wall like a secret, small enough that Sophia had almost missed it in the overwhelming wealth of the room. It depicted a young woman holding a candle, the light illuminating her face from below in that dramatic chiaroscuro style that Caravaggio had made famous. Beautiful, technically brilliant. But was it authentic? That's what she was here to determine. Or at least, that's what her cover story claimed. Sophia approached the painting slowly, pulling a small magnifying loupe and flashlight from her portfolio, aware that Dante was watching her every movement. She could feel his attention like heat on her skin, making her hyper-conscious of every gesture. She forced herself to focus on the work, examining brushstrokes, looking for signs of age, studying the craquelure pattern in the varnish. "It's extraordinary," she said after several minutes of silence. "The technique is flawless. The use of light and shadow, the way the candle seems to actually glow, it's masterful." She turned to face him. "But you didn't bring me here to tell you what you already know. You want to know if it's real." Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Appreciation, maybe. Or recognition. "I want to know the truth," he said simply. "Even if the truth is less valuable than the lie." "That's unusual," Sophia heard herself say before she could stop herself. "Most collectors prefer a comfortable fiction to an uncomfortable fact." "I'm not most collectors," Dante replied, and the way he said it made Sophia think he wasn't just talking about art anymore. "Truth has its own value, doesn't it? Even when it costs us something we'd rather keep." Sophia turned back to the painting, unsettled by how the conversation was veering away from safe, professional territory. "Based on my preliminary examination," she said, keeping her voice level, "I believe this is indeed a period work, likely from Caravaggio's workshop. Whether the master himself touched it, that would require more extensive testing. But it's authentic to the era, definitely 17th century, and executed by someone with extraordinary skill." "Worth the price you paid?" Dante asked. "Worth far more," Sophia admitted. "Whoever sold this to you didn't realize what they had." There was a pause. Then Dante said, "Would you like to see the rest of the collection?" Sophia's pulse quickened. This was exactly what she needed. Access to the villa, to his private spaces, to the life he kept hidden from investigators. "Of course," she said, managing to sound merely professional. "That would be very helpful for my assessment." Dante stood and gestured toward the door. The woman who'd let Sophia in, Maria, appeared as if summoned by telepathy. "She'll show you to the guest room," Dante said. "You'll stay for dinner, I hope. And tomorrow, we can discuss the collection properly. I'm afraid I have business that can't be delayed this evening." It wasn't really a question. Sophia found herself nodding, agreeing to stay, in the home of a man she was supposed to be investigating, crossing a line that her training said never to cross. Maria led her away before she could second-guess the decision, through more corridors to a guest room that was larger than Sophia's entire apartment in New York. After Maria left, Sophia sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried to calm her racing thoughts. This was good, she told herself. Staying here meant access, meant opportunity to search, to observe, to gather the evidence that would justify the Bureau's faith in her. She pulled out her phone, a specially modified device that looked normal but contained encrypted communication software, and typed a quick message to her handler. "Inside the villa. Staying overnight. We'll report tomorrow." The response came back almost immediately. "Be careful. Remember the objective. Don't get too close." Sophia stared at those words. Don't get too close. As if proximity was the only danger. As if the real threat wasn't the way Dante had looked at her, like he could see every wall she'd ever built and found them more interesting than whatever they were hiding. She stood and moved to the window, looking out over gardens gilded by late afternoon sun, and tried to remember why she was here. To stop a criminal, to uphold the law, to do her duty. But standing in this beautiful room, in this villa that felt more like a home than any place she'd lived in years, Sophia felt the first crack appear in the certainty that had carried her through her entire career. Dinner was served in a smaller dining room, intimate despite the crystal chandelier and artwork that casual research would price in the millions. Dante had changed into a dark suit, and when he stood to greet Sophia, she was struck again by how different he was from her expectations. The file had described him as ruthless, cold, calculating. The man pouring wine into her glass with careful attention moved with the grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, someone who had nothing to prove. They talked about art through the first course, a discussion that felt more like a test than small talk. Dante knew his subject intimately, could discuss technique and history and theory with the ease of someone who'd spent years studying. But he also asked questions, genuine questions, listening to her answers with focus that made Sophia forget she was supposed to be playing a role. By the second course, the conversation had drifted to philosophy, to questions about authenticity and value, about what made something real versus what made it merely convincing. You chose an interesting profession, Dante observed, studying her over his wine glass, authenticating art, determining what's real and what's false. Do you ever find it difficult? The line between the two? Sophia's throat tightened. This felt dangerous, like he was speaking in code, like he knew exactly who she was and what she was doing here. Everything can be authenticated, she said carefully. If you know what to look for. The right tests, the right analysis. Truth reveals itself under examination. Does it? Dante asked softly. Or does examination sometimes destroy the thing you're trying to understand? Some truths can only exist in darkness. Bring them into light and they change, become something else entirely. He set down his glass. I've found that the most important truths are the ones we're afraid to examine too closely. Because if we really looked at them, really tested them, we might discover they're not what we thought they were. And then we'd have to decide if we want to keep believing in the comfortable lie or accept the uncomfortable truth. Sophia felt like she couldn't breathe. They weren't talking about art anymore. Maybe they never had been. And the worst part was, she didn't know if Dante was aware she was an agent and playing with her, or if this was just how he talked, this ability to cut through surfaces and speak to something deeper. Either way, she was losing control of the situation. I should retire, she said, standing perhaps too quickly. It's been a long day. Of course, Dante rose as well, ever the perfect host. Maria will make sure you have everything you need. Tomorrow, I'll show you the rest of the collection. He paused, then added, I'm glad you're here, Sophia. I think this will be an interesting collaboration. The way he said her first name, with that slight emphasis, sent shivers down her spine. She fled to her room and spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to remember who she was supposed to be, and failing. The next morning, Sophia woke to find breakfast waiting on a terrace outside her room, the kind of thoughtful gesture that felt personal rather than professional. She ate slowly, watching dawn paint the gardens in gold and pink, and tried to prepare herself for another day of pretending. But when Maria came to collect her, saying Il Capo would like to show you something special, Sophia followed with a sense of walking toward something inevitable. Dante was waiting in what he called the gallery, a long room filled with artwork, that made Sophia's breath catch. Not because of the value, though these pieces were worth millions, but because of what they revealed about the man who'd collected them. These weren't trophies or investments. Each piece had been chosen with care, with meaning. They told a story about someone who understood beauty, who valued it not for what it cost, but for what it said. As Dante walked her through the collection, explaining how he'd acquired each work, why it mattered to him, Sophia felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the man in the file. This was someone far more complex, far more human, far more dangerous to her mission than any criminal could be. Sophia spent 3 days at the villa, and with each passing hour, the lines between her cover and her reality blurred further. Dante was a generous host, showing her not just his art collection, but the villa itself, its history, the restoration work he'd commissioned to preserve frescoes and architecture. He introduced her to his staff, not as servants, but as people he clearly valued, who looked at him with respect that seemed genuine rather than born of fear. And he talked to her, really talked, the kind of conversations Sophia hadn't had since before she joined the bureau, maybe since before she'd learned that being herself was dangerous. They discussed everything from philosophy to politics, art to ethics, and Dante never once tried to impress her or win an argument. He just listened, considered, responded with thoughtfulness that made her feel heard in ways she'd forgotten were possible. It was seductive, this feeling of being seen. And Sophia knew she should resist it, should remember that this was exactly what made him dangerous. But she couldn't quite make herself care. On the 4th morning, Sophia's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her handler. Time to move forward. We need you to access his office, his private records. Find something we can use. The words felt like ice water. This was why she was here. Not for philosophical conversations or tours of art collections, but to betray the trust of a man who'd shown her nothing but hospitality. Sophia stared at the message until the screen went dark, then sat on the terrace and tried to remember her training. Targets are not friends. Criminals deserve prosecution regardless of how charming they are. Your job is to gather evidence, not to question whether the law is just. But the problem was, Sophia was questioning everything. She'd been in Dante's home for days now, had searched for signs of the criminal the FBI insisted he was, and found nothing. No evidence of illegal activity, no hints of the violence and ruthlessness described in her files. Just a man who restored villas and collected art and treated everyone around him with respect. Either he was the most skilled actor she'd ever encountered, or the file was wrong. And if the file was wrong about this, what else might it be wrong about? That afternoon, Dante found her in the library, staring at a painting without really seeing it. "Sophia," he said gently, and when she turned, his expression was concerned. "Are you well? You seem troubled." Sophia opened her mouth to deliver some easy lie, the kind she'd been telling her entire life, and found she couldn't. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know if I'm well. I don't know anything anymore." Dante crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her, giving her space but offering presence. "Want to talk about it?" he asked. No expectations, no judgment. Just talk. And Sophia, for reasons she couldn't explain and definitely couldn't justify, found herself talking. Not about the mission, not about being an FBI agent, but about the things underneath. About spending her whole life becoming whoever others needed her to be. About losing herself so completely in the roles she played that she couldn't remember who she actually was. About the exhaustion of constant performance, the loneliness of never being known, the fear that if she stopped pretending, there'd be nothing underneath the mask. She talked until her voice was hoarse, until tears were running down her face, until she'd said things she'd never said to anyone, not even herself. Dante listened without interrupting, his dark eyes steady on hers, and when she finally fell silent, He was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I know what that's like," he said finally. "Living a life where everyone sees what they expect to see, what they need you to be, never who you actually are. I've been doing it my entire life. My father built an empire, a legacy, and I inherited the throne whether I wanted it or not. Everyone sees the Caruso heir, the boss, the role I'm supposed to play. No one asks if it's who I want to be. No one asks what I've sacrificed to become what others expected." His jaw tightened. "I've made choices I'm not proud of, done things that can't be undone. But I did them because I thought that's what duty required, what honor demanded, what my family needed. And now I look at my life and I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure any of it was worth becoming someone I don't recognize." Sophia's chest ached. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me like I'm a person instead of a position," Dante said. "Because I think you understand. Because maybe we both need someone who sees past the masks we wear." The air between them felt electric, dangerous, full of unspoken possibilities. Sophia knew she should pull back, should retreat into professional distance, should remember that every word Dante spoke might be manipulation, might be a performance as skilled as any she'd ever given. But she couldn't make herself believe it. The pain in his voice was too real, too familiar. It mirrored her own too perfectly. They sat in silence as afternoon light shifted across the library, two people who'd spent their lives pretending recognizing something true in each other. Finally, Dante stood. "I have business tonight," he said, his voice carefully neutral again, the vulnerability locked away. "But tomorrow, there's something I'd like to show you, if you're willing to stay." Sophia knew what her handler would say, that this was perfect, that getting closer meant better access, that she should absolutely stay and use this connection to complete her mission. But sitting there, looking at Dante, Sophia realized she wasn't thinking about the mission at all. She was thinking about the man who'd listened to her unravel without judgment, who'd offered his own pain in return, who made her feel less alone than she'd felt in years. "Yes," she heard herself say, "I'll stay." That night, alone in her room, Sophia's phone buzzed again. Her handler's message was terse. "Progress?" Sophia stared at the screen. She should report what she'd learned, should describe her growing access to Dante's inner world, should frame it all as successful infiltration. Instead, she typed, "Still building trust. Need more time." The response came fast. "Time is limited. We need results. Find something, or we pull you out." Sophia set the phone down and walked to the window. The villa's gardens were silver in moonlight, beautiful and serene. Somewhere in this house, Dante was dealing with business she probably didn't want to understand. And here she was, an FBI agent who'd forgotten why she was supposed to care about bringing him down. Because the more time she spent here, the more she wondered if the real criminals weren't the people in this villa, but the ones who'd sent her here, who'd reduced a complex human being to a file full of allegations, who'd decided he was guilty without ever trying to understand who he actually was. It was a dangerous thought, the kind that could destroy her career, her purpose, everything she'd built her life around. And Sophia couldn't quite make herself care about that either. The next day, Dante kept his promise. He took her somewhere she hadn't expected, somewhere that wasn't on any of the FBI's maps of his property. A workshop behind the villa, filled with tools and half-finished projects, sawdust on the floor and sunlight streaming through high windows. "This is where I come when I need to remember who I am," Dante said, running his hand over a piece of wood on the workbench. "When I need to create something instead of destroy, build instead of tear down." He looked at her. "I work with wood, furniture mostly, restorations. It's not part of the family business. Most people don't even know I do it." but it's the only time I feel completely myself." Sophia walked through the workshop, taking in the beautiful pieces in various stages of completion. A dining table with inlay work so delicate it looked like lace, a chair that managed to be both modern and classical, a bookshelf that was as much sculpture as furniture. "These are incredible," she breathed. "You made all of these?" "With my own hands," Dante confirmed. "No staff, no help, just me and the wood and time. It's the only thing in my life that's completely mine." He showed her his process, explaining the wood selection, the joinery techniques, the patience required to let pieces come together properly. As he talked, Sophia watched his hands, tattooed and scarred and surprisingly gentle as they moved over the wood, and she understood this was trust. He was showing her something private, something real, inviting her into a space where he didn't have to be the boss or the heir or the role everyone expected. He was just a man who made beautiful things and found peace in creation. "Why are you showing me this?" Sophia asked. "The same reason you told me about losing yourself," Dante said. "Because pretending is exhausting. Because sometimes you meet someone and you just know. They'll understand. They won't judge. They won't try to use it against you." He looked at her directly. "I think you're that person for me, Sophia. And I hope I'm that person for you." Sophia's throat tightened. "You barely know me," she managed. "I know enough," Dante said. "I know you're running from something. I know you're tired of being whoever others need you to be. I know you came here for reasons you're not telling me, and I don't care. Because whoever you are, whatever brought you here, this moment right now, this is real. I feel it. And I think you do too." Sophia couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because he was right. Despite every reason she should stay detached, should maintain her cover, should remember her mission, this felt more real than anything in her life had felt for years. She wasn't playing a role here. She was just herself, raw and uncertain and scared, and Dante was looking at her like that was exactly what he wanted to see. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move. "Sophia," Dante said softly, and the way he said her name made her look up. "Whatever you're afraid of, whatever you think will happen if you let yourself be real for once, I promise you, it's not as scary as spending your whole life pretending. I've been doing both. I know which one actually destroys you." He took a step closer. "Stay. Not because you have a mission or a job or a reason. Just stay because you want to. Because for once in your life, you're choosing what you actually want instead of what you think you should do." And Sophia, who'd spent 29 years being careful, being controlled, being whoever kept her safe, made a choice that had nothing to do with duty or responsibility or following orders. She stayed, and in that moment, everything changed. The days blurred into something Sophia had never experienced before. Time in the villa didn't follow normal rules. There were no schedules, no expectations beyond being present. Dante worked, though Sophia never saw exactly what that work entailed. Men would come and go, conversations in rapid Italian behind closed doors, phone calls taken in other rooms. But when he was with her, all of that fell away. They'd spend hours in his workshop, Sophia learning basic woodworking techniques, while Dante worked on his current project. They'd walk through the gardens in early morning light, talking about everything and nothing. They'd have long dinners where wine flowed and conversation ranged from silly to profound. And slowly, carefully, Sophia felt the armor she'd worn her entire life beginning to dissolve. She laughed more than she had in years. She expressed opinions without calculating how they'd be received. She existed without performing. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was everything she hadn't known she needed. But the phone kept buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from her handler. "We need evidence. We need progress. We need you to do your job. Sophia ignored them as long as she could, but eventually she couldn't avoid it anymore. She had to give them something, or they'd pull her out. So, one night, while Dante was occupied with business, Sophia did what she'd been sent here to do. She searched. Started with the obvious places, his office, his desk, looking for anything that would prove the FBI's case against him. She found business records, all meticulously documented and apparently legal. Art acquisition receipts, villa restoration invoices, correspondence with scholars and museums, nothing that suggested criminal activity. She searched his private rooms next, feeling sick with the betrayal but unable to stop, and found nothing. Books, mostly. Music. Personal items that spoke of a man with varied interests and careful habits. No hidden safes. No secret documents. No evidence of the empire the FBI insisted he ran. Either Dante was extraordinarily careful, or there was nothing to find. Sophia was starting to suspect it was the latter. She was in his workshop, looking through drawers she had no right to open, when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, heart hammering, to find Dante standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable. "Find what you're looking for?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia's mouth went dry. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there with a drawer open behind her, caught in the worst possible way. Dante entered the workshop slowly, closing the door behind him. "How long have you known," he asked, "that you're FBI?" "Since the first day." Sophia felt the floor drop out from under her. "The first day. You've known this entire time. Who I am, what I'm here for. And you. What? You let me stay anyway?" Dante leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "I let you stay because I was curious. I wanted to know what your people thought they had on me, what evidence they thought they could find." But mostly, he looked directly at her. "I let you stay because I wanted to know if you were like the others they've sent. If you'd already made up your mind about me, or if you'd actually look at what was in front of you instead of what's in your file." Sophia's hands were shaking. "Everything in the file is allegations," Dante continued. "Suspicions, theories. They've been investigating my family for decades, and they've never proven anything because there's nothing to prove. My father? Yes. He did things that were illegal, that I'm not proud of. But when I took over, I changed everything. I went legitimate. I walked away from the criminal activities, absorbed the losses, made enemies in my own organization for it. But the FBI doesn't care about that. They don't care about truth. They care about convictions, about statistics, about looking like they're winning the war on crime. So they keep coming after me, keep sending agents, keep hoping one will find something that isn't there." He moved closer. "But you're different from the others, Sophia. They came looking for a monster. You came looking for the truth. And that's what scares them, I think. That's why they're pushing you so hard. Because they know if you actually see who I am, you won't give them what they want." Sophia felt tears burning her eyes. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't know who to believe anymore." "Believe yourself," Dante said. "What have you seen here? In all the days you've been in this villa, in all the time you've spent with me, have you seen anything that suggests I'm the criminal they say I am? Or have you seen a man trying to live a different life than the one he inherited?" Sophia thought about everything she'd witnessed, the respect his staff showed him, the care he took with his restoration projects, the gentleness in his hands when he worked with wood, the vulnerability in his voice when he talked about feeling trapped by expectations, the way he'd listened to her without judgment when she'd fallen apart. None of it matched the file. None of it suggested the ruthless criminal the FBI had described. "I've only seen you," she said. "The real you." "That's more than most people ever see," Dante said softly. "That's more than I've shown anyone in years. Because you made me feel like it was safe to be real, like I didn't have to perform, or protect, or pretend. You gave me that gift, Sophia, even while you were here to destroy me. The accusation should have stung, but it sounded more like understanding than anger. I'm sorry, Sophia said. I'm so sorry. I didn't. She stopped, because what could she say? She had come here to betray him. That was the truth. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being an agent and started being a person. And that person didn't want to hurt this man who'd shown her kindness and trust, and something that felt dangerously like care. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You have a choice to make. You can go back to your people, tell them what you found, which is nothing. Or you can stay. Stay and figure out who you are when you're not following orders. Stay and see where this goes." He gestured between them. "Because there's something here, Sophia. You feel it. I feel it. Something real, something that matters. But only if you choose it. Only if you decide for yourself what you want instead of doing what you think you should." Sophia looked at him, this complicated, beautiful, impossible man who'd somehow seen past every wall she'd ever built. Every rule in her training said she should leave. Every principle she'd lived by said duty came before desire. But standing there, meeting Dante's eyes, Sophia realized that all those rules had been written by people who didn't know her, didn't care about her, who saw her as a tool instead of a person. "I want to stay," she heard herself say. "But I need you to know they're going to come for me. When I don't report back, when I don't give them what they want, they'll come." "Let them come," Dante said, and there was steel in his voice now. "I've been dealing with the FBI for years. I know how to protect what's mine." He moved closer, and Sophia couldn't breathe. "Are you mine, Sophia? Is that what you're saying?" "I don't know what I'm saying," Sophia admitted. "I don't know anything anymore, except that I don't want to leave. I don't want to go back to pretending. I don't want to be Agent Martinez following orders. I want to be Sophia, whoever she is, figuring it out with you." "Then that's what you'll be," Dante said, and he pulled her into his arms. Sophia collapsed against him, feeling him solid and real and present, and let herself cry. For the lies she'd told, for the career she was probably ending, for the rules she was breaking, but also for the relief of finally making a choice that was hers, of choosing what she wanted instead of what she should want, of choosing him and herself, and the possibility of something real. They stood like that until Sophia's tears stopped, until her breathing steadied, until she felt strong enough to pull back and look at him. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Dante said, "we figure it out together. But first you need to make it official. Tell your handlers you're done. No more reports, no more pretending. If you're staying as yourself. Not as an agent, not as a spy, just as Sophia. Can you do that?" Sophia thought about the message waiting on her phone, the pressure to deliver results, the career she'd spent years building. Then she thought about the life she could have here, real and complicated and honest. She pulled out her phone, typed a message to her handler. "I'm out. I found nothing because there's nothing to find. You're investigating the wrong man. Consider this my resignation." She hit send before she could second guess, then turned the phone off completely. "Done," she said. "I'm done being who they wanted me to be." "Good," Dante said, and he smiled. A real smile. No guards, no masks. "Because I like who you actually are, Sophia. Let's see who she becomes when she's finally free." The next days were strange, untethered, like living in a space between worlds. Sophia waited for the FBI to show up, for consequences, for someone to force her back into the life she'd walked away from. But no one came. Dante explained that he had lawyers, powerful ones, and that unless the Bureau had actual evidence of wrongdoing, they couldn't touch him. And Sophia, as a private citizen who'd resigned, was free to be wherever she chose. It should have felt wrong, this freedom. It should have felt like betrayal or failure. Instead, it felt like waking up after years of sleepwalking. Sophia started to explore who she was without the FBI defining her. She discovered she loved the quiet mornings in the villa's gardens, that she had opinions about art that weren't performance, that she could laugh without calculating how it would be perceived, that she liked her coffee strong and her wine red and long, conversations that went nowhere but felt like everything. And she discovered that Dante, when he wasn't being the boss or the heir or playing any role, was funny and thoughtful and surprisingly gentle. They fell into rhythms, patterns of shared time that felt like building something neither of them had words for yet. But reality couldn't be held off forever. 3 weeks after Sophia's resignation, Dante came to find her in the library, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said. "There's something you should know about what I do, about what my family business actually is." Sophia set down her book. "I'm listening." Dante sat across from her, choosing his words carefully. "My father ran a criminal empire. That part of your file is true. But when I inherited it, I made a choice. I started the process of going legitimate, closing down the illegal operations, finding legal alternatives, cutting ties with the families who wanted to stay in the old ways. It cost me allies, cost me money, made me enemies on both sides. Law enforcement doesn't trust that I've changed, and criminals think I'm weak for walking away. But I did it anyway, because I didn't want to be my father." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not innocent, Sophia. I've done things, sanctioned things, that were illegal, things I can't undo. For years, I operated in a gray area, trying to transition without getting everyone killed. I still have protection, still have people who owe loyalty to my family name. And sometimes, that protection requires actions that aren't legal. I need you to know that. I need you to choose this with full knowledge of what it means." Sophia absorbed this. It was what she'd suspected, what the evidence suggested. Dante was transitioning from crime to legitimacy, but he wasn't clean. He probably never would be completely clean. There would always be ties, always be ghosts of his father's empire, always be moral complexity. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. The man in my file, the one they say is ruthless and violent, is that who you were? Or who they needed you to be?" "Both," Dante admitted. "When I first took over, I did what I thought I had to do to survive, to protect my people. I made hard choices. Some of them were right. Some of them I'd take back if I could. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm trying not to be." He leaned forward. "You asked me once why I showed you my workshop, my real self. It's because I'm tired, Sophia. Tired of being what everyone expects. Tired of living in shadows. I want something different. I want to be different. And somehow, improbably, you make me believe it's possible." Sophia felt something crack open in her chest. The man you're describing, the one trying to change, trying to build something better. That's who I see. That's who I've seen from the beginning. Dante's eyes searched hers. "And you're okay with that? With the complexity, the gray areas, the fact that I'll never be perfectly clean?" Sophia thought about it, really thought about it. By every standard she'd been trained to uphold, Dante was a criminal. But standards were abstractions. Reality was complicated. And the reality was that she'd spent weeks with this man and seen more honor, more integrity, more genuine goodness than she'd seen in years working for an agency that cared more about statistics than truth. "I'm okay with it," she said, "because perfect doesn't exist, because everyone has things they regret, Because you're trying, and that matters more than what your file says. Dante released a breath he'd been holding. There's something else, he said. Staying here, being with me, it puts you in danger. Not from me. Never from me. But I have enemies. People who'd love to find a weakness. If they know you matter to me, they'll use that. Are you willing to accept that risk? Sophia met his gaze. I spent my entire career taking risks for a cause I'm not sure I believed in. I think I can take a risk for something real. This is real, Dante said. What we're building, it's real. I don't know what it is exactly. Don't know what it becomes. But it matters. You matter. More than anything has mattered in a long time. They sat in silence, the weight of what they were acknowledging hanging between them. Finally, Sophia spoke. I need to know something. When you said you've known from the beginning who I was, were these weeks, this thing between us, was that part of some strategy? Was any of it real? Dante moved to sit beside her on the couch. Every moment was real, he said. Yes, I knew you were FBI. But I also saw you, Sophia. The woman under the agent. The person you'd forgotten you were. That's who I responded to. That's who made me want to show you the workshop. Share my thoughts. Be vulnerable in ways I haven't been vulnerable in years. The FBI sent an agent. But I met Sophia. And Sophia is who I want. Not because she's useful or strategic. Because she makes me feel less alone. Because she understands. Because when I'm with her, I can be real too. Sophia felt tears threatening. No one's ever said anything like that to me. Because you never let anyone close enough to see you, Dante said gently. You were too busy being what they needed. But I see you now. And I like what I see. All of it. The strength, the uncertainty, the person you're becoming now that you're free to choose. Sophia kissed him then, leaning in without thinking, just responding to the pull between them that had been building for weeks. Dante kissed her back, one hand coming up to cup her face, and it was gentle and desperate and real in ways Sophia had never experienced. They broke apart, both breathing hard. That's new, Sophia said shakily. That felt very new. Very real, Dante agreed. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. Sophia, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we really do this, I'm all in. I don't do halfway. I don't play games. You matter to me. And if you let me, I'm going to care about you in ways that might be intense, ways that might be too much. If that's not what you want, tell me now. Because once we start this, I won't be able to stop. Sophia thought about a lifetime of people telling her she was too much, too intense, too emotional. And here was Dante, warning her that he might be too much, as if that were something to apologize for. I've spent my whole life being told I'm too much, she said. Maybe I'm ready to be with someone who matches me instead of asking me to dim. Then let's be too much together, Dante said, and kissed her again. That night, they made love for the first time, and it was everything Sophia hadn't known she needed. Not perfect, not performance, just real. Two people figuring each other out, learning what gave pleasure and what needed patience, laughing at awkwardness and gasping at intensity. Afterward, lying in Dante's bed, wrapped in his arms, Sophia felt something she'd been missing her entire life. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of acceptance, being seen completely and chosen anyway. You're thinking too loud, Dante murmured against her hair. Sorry, Sophia said. Just processing. Talk to me, Dante said. Tell me what's in that beautiful, complicated mind. Sophia was quiet for a moment. I'm thinking that 3 months ago, I was Agent Martinez, and my whole identity was tied up in that role. And now, I'm just Sophia, and I don't know who she is yet, but I'm not scared of finding out anymore. Because you make me feel like whoever she is, will be enough." "She is enough," Dante said. "She's more than enough. And we'll figure out who she is together. There's no rush, no pressure, just time and space to become." Sophia turned in his arms to face him. "Who are you becoming?" she asked. "Without the role? Without the expectations?" Dante considered this. "I think I'm becoming someone who builds instead of destroys," he said. "Someone who creates beauty instead of managing empire. Someone who's allowed to be gentle and still be strong. Someone who loves openly instead of protecting carefully." He smiled. "Someone who gets to wake up next to you and doesn't have to pretend that's not exactly what he wants." 3 months after Sophia resigned from the FBI, her former handler showed up at the villa gates. She'd known it would happen eventually. The Bureau didn't like loose ends, and an agent who'd walked away mid-mission was definitely a loose end. Dante offered to handle it, to have his lawyer send them away. But Sophia said, no. She needed to do this herself. She needed to close that chapter properly. So she met Agent Harrison at a cafe in the nearby town, neutral territory, public space. He looked older than she remembered, more tired. Or maybe she just saw him differently now. "You look good," he said when she sat down, "like you've been sleeping well." "I have," Sophia replied. "Better than I did in years working for you." Harrison grimaced. "That's fair. Look, Sophia, I'm not here to pressure you to come back. Your resignation was accepted. But I need to know, did Caruso threaten you? Coerce you? Because if he did," Sophia cut him off. "No one coerced me. I made a choice." Harrison shook his head. "You were one of our best agents. You had a future with the Bureau. And you threw it away for what? For a criminal? He's not what you think he is," Sophia said. "I spent months with him. I looked. I searched. And there's nothing there. He's clean." "We know he's not clean," Harrison said. "The Caruso family, we know what they've been involved in. Just because he's good at hiding it doesn't mean—" "Then prove it," Sophia interrupted. "Show me evidence. Real evidence, not suspicion and allegations. Show me something concrete that proves Dante Caruso is actively engaged in criminal activity." Harrison was silent. "That's what I thought," Sophia said. "You don't have anything. You've been investigating his family for decades, and you've got nothing on him specifically because there's nothing to get. But you can't admit that. Can't admit you've been wasting resources chasing a man who's trying to go legitimate. Because that would mean questioning whether your methods are actually about justice or just about winning." Harrison leaned forward. "You're defending him. You've been compromised. This is exactly what we worried about." "Maybe I have been compromised," Sophia agreed. "But not the way you mean. I've been compromised by reality, by complexity, by the discovery that the world isn't as simple as good guys and bad guys, us and them. Dante has done things I don't agree with. He carries weight from his father's choices, but he's trying to change. And instead of supporting that, instead of helping someone move away from crime, you're trying to drag him back into it by insisting he's guilty of things you can't prove." "You really care about him," Harrison said, and it sounded like an accusation. "I do," Sophia admitted, "and I care about truth, which is why I can't work for an agency that cares more about convictions than truth." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know this means you can never come back. Not just to the FBI, but to any law enforcement. You're burned, Sophia. No agency will touch you after this." "I know," Sophia said, "and I'm okay with it." Harrison stood to leave. "I hope you're right about him," he said. "I hope he's worth everything you're giving up. Because if you're wrong, if he's playing you, there won't be anything we can do to help." "I'm not wrong," Sophia said, "and I don't need your help. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." After Harrison left, Sophia sat in the cafe for a while longer, processing the finality of what had just happened. She'd really done it. Walked away from her career, her identity, everything she'd built. And sitting there, she waited to feel regret or fear or doubt. But all she felt was relief and certainty that she'd made the right choice. When she returned to the villa, Dante was waiting in the garden. "How did it go?" he asked. "It's done," Sophia said. "Really done. They've accepted that I'm not coming back." He studied her face. "How do you feel?" "Free," Sophia said. "Terrified and free." Dante pulled her into his arms. "The terrified part, we can work on," he said. "The free part, we'll build on. You have time now. Time to figure out who you want to be, what you want to do. No pressure, no expectations, just possibilities." Sophia rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I've been thinking about that," she said, "about what I want to do. And I want to help," Sophia said. "You're trying to legitimize your business interests, trying to transition completely. That's complicated work. You need people you trust, people who understand both worlds. I understand law enforcement, understand their tactics and thinking. Maybe I can help you navigate that." "You don't have to prove your worth to me," Dante said gently. "You don't have to earn your place here." "I know," Sophia said, "but I want to contribute. Want to be part of building something, not just watching it happen. If you want my help, I'm offering. But if you'd rather I find something else, I will." Dante pulled back to look at her. "If you help me, it means being involved in things that might be legally gray. It means using your training in ways the FBI would definitely not approve. It means fully crossing a line you can't uncross." "I crossed that line months ago," Sophia said, "when I chose you over duty, when I resigned instead of reporting. I'm already on the other side, Dante. Might as well make the choice mean something." "All right," Dante said. "Then let's do it together. Let's build something that's actually clean, actually legal, actually sustainable. Use your knowledge and my resources and make it work. Partnership?" "Partnership," Sophia agreed, "in business and everything else." They sealed it with a kiss, and Sophia felt pieces of herself clicking into place. For the first time in her life, she wasn't following orders, or playing a role, or being what someone else needed. She was choosing her path, building her future, becoming someone she could recognize. Over the following months, Sophia discovered she was good at the work. Really good. She understood regulatory frameworks, knew how to navigate bureaucracy, could spot potential legal problems before they became actual legal problems. She helped Dante restructure his business interests, cleaning up gray areas, establishing clear separations between his legitimate holdings and anything questionable. It was complex, challenging work that used all her skills in ways that felt meaningful. But more than the work, she discovered what it meant to build a life with someone. She and Dante developed rhythms, patterns of shared time and separate space. Mornings in the garden with coffee. Evenings in the workshop where Dante taught her woodworking while they talked through business challenges. Nights in bed where they learned each other's bodies and hearts in equal measure. They fought sometimes because both were strong-willed and opinionated, but they fought fair, fighting to understand rather than to win. And they made up thoroughly, communication followed by connection that felt like coming home. Sophia started writing again, something she hadn't done since college. Started a blog about art authentication, sharing her expertise in ways that didn't require FBI credentials. It gained a following, led to consulting opportunities from museums and collectors. She built a legitimate career that was entirely hers. And 6 months after leaving the FBI, Sophia realized she was happy. Not the temporary happiness of a good day or a nice moment, but deep, sustainable happiness that came from living authentically. from being seen and accepted and chosen for who she actually was. One evening, sitting on the villa's terrace watching the sun set over the hills, Dante took her hand. "I have something to ask you," he said. Sophia turned to him. "I'm listening." "Marry me," Dante said simply. "Not because it's expected or strategic or makes sense by anyone's standards but ours. Marry me because I want to build a life with you officially. Because I want everyone to know you chose me and I chose you. Because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life figuring out who we become together." Sophia felt tears welling up. The FBI trained her for a lot of things, but no one had prepared her for this. For a man who saw all of her and wanted more. For love that didn't ask her to be smaller or different or less. For a future built on truth instead of performance. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married in the villa's garden, just like Elena and Dante before them, though Sophia didn't know about that other story. It was small and intimate, just the people who mattered most. Maria, who'd become like a mother to Sophia, a few of Dante's trusted people. Sophia's sister, the only family member she'd stayed in contact with, who cried through the entire ceremony. And when they spoke their vows, promising to see each other completely, to accept the darkness and the light, to build something real together, Sophia felt a sense of rightness that went beyond words. A year after the wedding, Sophia stood in Dante's workshop, running her hand over the table he was building. It was their first collaborative project, something they'd designed together for their home. Watching it take shape felt like watching their relationship manifest in wood and joint and careful craftsmanship. "You're thinking too loud again?" Dante said from where he was working on the table's base. Sophia smiled, "Just thinking about how different my life is from what I planned." "Better or worse?" Dante asked. "So much better," Sophia said. "Scary better. Like I might wake up and discover it was all a dream better." Dante set down his tools and crossed to her. "It's not a dream," he said. "You're really here. We're really here. Building this beautiful, complicated life together." He kissed her forehead. "And it's only going to get more complicated." Sophia pulled back to look at him. "What do you mean?" Dante's expression was serious but not worried. "I got a call today from someone I used to work with back in the old days. He's trying to go legitimate like I did, but he's struggling, making mistakes that are going to get him arrested or killed. He asked if I'd help. Be a consultant, basically. Use what I learned to help others transition out of crime." Sophia processed this. "That could be good," she said slowly. "That could be really meaningful work. But it's also risky. Getting involved with people who are still connected to criminal enterprises, even as consultants, it could draw attention, could put targets on both of us." "I know," Dante said, "which is why I'm not doing it unless you're okay with it. This affects you too. We make big decisions together." Sophia thought about it, thought about the risks and the potential, thought about the fact that helping others leave crime was exactly the kind of work that could make real change, the kind that mattered more than prosecutions or statistics. "I think you should do it," she said, "but carefully, with protections in place. And I think I should help. My law enforcement background, I can help vet people, can help identify risks. We could actually be good at this together." "You're sure?" Dante asked. "Because once we start, this becomes what we do. Who we are. A couple who helps criminals go straight. Not exactly a conventional career path." "When has anything about us been conventional?" Sophia pointed out. "We're already the FBI agent who fell for her target, and the Mafia heir trying to go clean. Might as well lean into it." So they did. Over the next year, they built something neither had expected. A consulting service, carefully structured and completely legal, that helped people transition out of organized crime. It was delicate work, dangerous at times, but deeply satisfying. They helped restructure businesses, navigate legal systems, establish legitimate income streams. Some clients succeeded, some failed. But every person they helped transition was one less person actively committing crimes, one more person trying to build something better. The FBI noticed, of course. Harrison called Sophia one day, his tone careful. "What you're doing," he said. "It's interesting. Unusual. Possibly effective. We've been watching some of your clients. The success rate is impressive." Sophia waited, knowing there was more. "We'd like to work with you," Harrison continued. "Not officially, not on record, but sharing information, coordinating efforts. You help people go legitimate. We'd like to know who's actually changing versus who's using your service as cover. Would you be willing to consult?" Sophia looked at Dante, who'd been listening to the call on speaker. It was his decision, too. They'd built this together. After a long moment, Dante nodded. "Under specific conditions," Sophia said into the phone. "We don't inform on clients who are genuinely trying to change. We don't wear wires or gather evidence. But if we see someone using our service as cover for continued criminal activity, we'll share that information. And in return, you leave alone the ones who are actually going straight. You give them space to succeed." "Those are big asks," Harrison said. "But I think we can work with them." "Welcome back, Martinez." "Sort of. Not back," Sophia corrected. "I'm not coming back to the Bureau. I'm not an agent again. I'm a consultant in a very specific area, working on my own terms. But yeah, let's see if we can make this work." After she hung up, Dante pulled her into his arms. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Partnering with them again, even informally?" "I'm sure," Sophia said, "because we're not compromising who we are. We're using every tool we have to do good work. Your knowledge of the criminal world and my knowledge of law enforcement, combined to actually help people. That's not betrayal. That's synthesis." Dante kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so wise?" "When I stopped following other people's rules and started thinking for myself," Sophia said. "When I met you and learned that complex is okay, that gray areas are where real life happens, that you can be both things at once, and that's not weakness, it's wholeness." They stood like that for a while, wrapped in each other, contemplating the strange, complicated, beautiful life they'd built together. A life that didn't fit any category, that couldn't be labeled or simplified. That was theirs. 2 years after Sophia walked away from the FBI, she sat in a university auditorium giving a guest lecture. The topic was ethics in law enforcement, shades of gray in criminal justice, the complexity of change and rehabilitation. Students filled the seats, eager and idealistic, seeing the world in the black and white terms Sophia had once believed in. She looked out at them and remembered being that certain, that sure of her righteousness. Then she told them her story. Not all of it, not the specific names or details that were private, but the shape of it. How she'd been sent to investigate someone she'd been told was a criminal. How she'd found something more complex than her training had prepared her for. How she'd had to choose between duty and truth, between following orders and following her conscience. How she'd walked away from her career because the reality she'd discovered didn't match the narrative she'd been given. How she'd learned that people were complicated, that change was possible, that sometimes the system was wrong, and you had to have the courage to say so. When she finished, there was silence. Then a hand went up. A young woman, maybe 22. "You're saying we should ignore the law?" she asked. "If we think it's wrong?" "No," Sophia said carefully. "I'm saying we should think critically. That law and justice aren't always the same thing. That systems are built by people with biases and agendas. That sometimes The most ethical thing you can do is question authority, even when that's hard, even when it costs you something. I'm saying that if you're going to work in criminal justice, you need to stay human. You need to remember that the people you're investigating, prosecuting, judging, they're complex. They're more than their worst choices. And if we want a system that actually works, that actually creates positive change, we have to be willing to see that complexity. Another hand. But don't some people deserve punishment? Don't actions have consequences? Of course, Sophia said. I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences. I'm saying consequences should aim toward rehabilitation and change, not just punishment for its own sake. I'm saying we should celebrate when people try to go straight, instead of making it impossible for them to ever be anything but criminals. I'm saying the goal should be less crime, not more convictions. And sometimes those aren't the same thing. She fielded questions for another hour, and when she finally left the auditorium, Dante was waiting in the hallway. How'd it go? He asked. I think I made them uncomfortable, Sophia said. Good, Dante replied. Comfort is the enemy of growth. You made them think. That matters. They drove back to the villa in comfortable silence, Sophia processing the lecture, Dante working through something in his own mind. Finally, he spoke. I've been thinking about something, he said. About legacy, about what we leave behind. Sophia waited. I want to start a foundation, Dante continued, using my family's wealth, our family's wealth, to fund programs that help people transition out of crime, job training, education, legal support. Make it easier for people to choose change. Make it sustainable. Give them the resources I didn't have when I was trying to go straight. Sophia felt her chest tighten with emotion. That's beautiful, she said. That's taking everything painful about your past and transforming it into something that helps others. That's redemption. Real redemption. Will you help me build it? Dante asked. Use your connections, your knowledge, your passion for this work. Of course, Sophia said. Let's build something that matters, something that changes the system from the inside. So they did. The Caruso Foundation launched a year later, quietly at first, funding pilot programs in 3 cities. The results were remarkable. Recidivism rates dropped. People who'd been written off as career criminals successfully transitioned to legitimate work. Families stayed together instead of being destroyed by incarceration. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was perfect. But it was meaningful. It was change. And slowly, the narrative around Dante began to shift. He wasn't the criminal heir anymore. He was the philanthropist, the social justice advocate, the man using his background to make positive change. The FBI quietly closed their investigation, acknowledging there was nothing to investigate. And Sophia, working alongside him, discovered that this was what she'd been searching for her entire career. Not convictions or arrests or following orders, but genuine, complicated, messy work that helped actual people. That made the world incrementally better. That mattered. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from having all the answers, but from accepting that questions are part of the journey. Sophia and Dante had found that peace. Their life wasn't simple. They still navigated complex situations, made difficult choices, lived in gray areas that made other people uncomfortable. But they did it together, with honesty and trust and love that had been tested and proven real. 5 years after Sophia walked into Dante's villa as an FBI agent, she stood in their garden, watching dawn paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Dante came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and they stood together in the quiet morning. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Sophia said. "Where we started, how far we've come, how I almost missed this because I was too committed to being who I thought I should be instead of who I actually was." Dante kissed her shoulder. But you didn't miss it. You made the brave choice, the hard choice. You chose yourself, and you chose me, and you chose truth over comfortable fiction. That takes courage. We both made brave choices, Sophia said. You chose to change when it would have been easier to stay who your father was. You chose to be vulnerable with me when you could have stayed protected. You chose to believe in the possibility of something better. We chose each other, Dante agreed. And we keep choosing each other every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They stood like that as the sun rose higher, two people who'd been told their whole lives they were too much, finally understanding that they were exactly enough for each other. If this story touched something deep in your soul, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if this resonated with you, consider becoming a member for early access to future stories. And if this story truly spoke to you, click the super thanks button. Your support helps us continue creating stories about love that doesn't ask you to be smaller, about finding someone who sees your complexity and calls it beautiful, about choosing authenticity over safety. Because maybe that's what we're all really searching for. Not someone who fits into our plans, but someone who makes us question whether our plans were right to begin with. Not someone who makes life easier, but someone who makes life more real. And maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous missions aren't the ones that risk our lives, but the ones that risk our carefully constructed identities. The ones that force us to choose between who we're supposed to be and who we actually are. And maybe choosing authenticity, choosing love, choosing to see complexity instead of reducing everything to simple categories. Maybe that's the most radical act of all.